Hello, everyone. Thanks for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I'm here with Jim Johnson. I'm here with Al Spader, and today we're going to talk about, and let me make sure I say the title right, Star Trek Adventures, the Federation-Klingon War Tactical Campaign. This book is spectacular because, all right, so previous Star Trek books, I've noticed, previous books that you published, tend to try to ease you into Star Trek, but this is all about war, and I love that. It just goes straight into it. You don't. There is a short introduction, but it goes straight into character options, and then game mastery, this campaign, and rules, and the new rules, optional rules that you have for this, which is great. But let me not jump ahead too far ahead just yet. Yeah, let's go straight into it. First thing you have here is character options, which is I think is fantastic because let's face it, when we have most source books, the first thing that people go for in the books is their options for the
hmm
characters.
hmm
So yeah, what can you share us about this section?
Well, I can start things off, Jim, if you like.
Yeah, go right ahead, man.
So we have a very firm belief with the Star Trek Adventures line that all books should be usable by both game masters and players, right? So we knew that the campaign was going to be the primary focus of the game master. We wanted to get some tools in for players as well. And that's where chapter one came into play. We knew we had an opportunity to look at like the TOS and even into the movie era as well, along with Discovery. So we started right away. We said, let's find some cool, weird, um, like like movie era species that we want to include. And that was kind of like where we started things off. And I was pretty excited at the six that we were able to get in there. Very, very cool species.
Yeah, just start kicking off. I mean, yeah, you're right. We did that little bit of an intro, and then we just wanted to just get right into it. You know, unlike the campaign guides that we've done, where we kind of like ease you into it with the state of the galaxy and what's the situation in that particular timeline. You know, we kind of covered that in the Discovery campaign guide, right? And it was like, okay, if this is going to be a tactical campaign, war focused book, let's just jump right on into it. And absolutely, with the character options, I know with other game systems, like that's always what I pick up the splat books for. I'm looking for what player stuff can I use. You know, and then if I'm a game master, I look for game master stuff too. But I think the whole first chapter here is good, what 40 odd pages of character stuff. It's species, it's talents, it's optional character advancement rules, character roles, weapons, more gear, and then that whole scar system that I imagine that we'll probably talk about. But yeah, I really wanted to make sure that the players knew that we were giving them some love right from the start.
Now, remind me again. It's been a while since I checked out Discovery. Are these new options, these aliens, all from Discovery, or there's some of them new? Where do they come from?
Yeah, that's the great thing about this book, and I think we're finally at the point now with the Star Trek Adventures, because we're 7 years, almost 8 years into it. We're able to start doing some deep cuts now into like all those great alien species that you see in the background of Star Trek 3 and Star Trek 4. You know, like in the Federation Council meetings, all these really cool aliens, like their heads and bodies, like you see all the great prosthetics and stuff. And it's like, oh, well, what's that alien species? What's that alien species? And so other than the ANR, which are in here, and of course the ANR have been well represented on Enterprise and Strange New Worlds. I told the team, I said, when we were developing the outline, like what cool alien species can we pull in here, either referencing the great stuff that FASA and Decipher did in their own supplements, because like they were doing some pretty good deep cuts with like especially the movie era, and then what can we pull in? And Al, I mean, from your perspective, like, do you remember? Because I know it's been a couple of years now that we've been working on this book. Do you remember how did we narrow it down to the six we ended up with? Do you remember any of that conversation?
I don't remember. I do remember there was a bigger list of like 10 or 12
Yeah.
that we kept trimming back on. And I think we ended up looking for the coolest, most juxtaposed body types that we could. And I thought that was kind of cool. And in general, Manny, what we really wanted to do was take characters that exist in canon from like from the original series, the animated series, and the movie era, and imagine who they were before that during the Klingon War, right? Because this era, it spans only 30 or 40 years. So it's quite possible that a captain that appears in Star Trek 4 could have been, a lieutenant way back in the Klingon War. So we made a very important decision early on that this wasn't just going to be about Discovery, that we were going to be pulling in from this entire century, essentially.
Yeah, and I think for the like I know there is a very strong contingent of original series slash movie era fans that play the game and want more stuff from the movie era and the original series era in the game. And I think this is one of those subversive books, right, where we've got the Discovery on the cover and we do focus on the Klingon Federation War. But if you open up the covers and you start looking at what's in the book, you're going to see, like I said, 5 of these 6 species are all pulled right out of the movie era. A lot of those assets that Al mentioned are right out of the movie era. You got key characters that we backtracked through their career, and I think if you're a big fan of original series and the movie era, you're going to see that stuff in here, and we're kind of like showing you that the Klingon War. I mean, we didn't really focus on this in the book itself, but like you could probably draw a line from what happens in the Klingon War all the way out to Cartwright's conspiracy thing in Star Trek 6, right? I mean, that's 50 odd years, maybe a little bit more of time that in canon it's all connected, right? I mean, the pieces are there. Canon doesn't necessarily do a great job of weaving it all together, but that's our job, right? That's our job as game designers and the shepherds of this particular role-playing game system and game line, where we're giving you those tools and we're kind of showing you how the dots connect, and then it's up to the game masters and the players to take that information and go, oh wait, this is more than just a discovery book. This is that whole 23rd century continuum from where we see like the beginning of season 1 of Discovery all the way out to I guess the first chunk of Generations, right, with the Enterprise B. You could take it out all the way out, like that whole chunk of timeline there is all connected. It's all connected.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I I look at this book and I haven't finished looking through this entirely yet, but it yeah, right. It's not well, yes, there's a discovery campaign in here, and that is in there. But if you were, this is easy could have been almost like a core rule book 2 uh, a book, because you expand on a lot of different things
Mhm. Yeah.
from a lot of the rules and everything, which we'll talk more as we go on for each chapter. So I find that really fascinating, especially the section here about wartime traits and wartime talents. So
Mm.
one thing when I tell people about Star Trek and we start playing and testing it out, um, when I emphasize the exciting aspects of Star Trek, all the actiony, political, wartime stuff that goes on, they want to make a character just like it. And sometimes we do come into some a bit of walls here and there, like how to maximize their characters for as a soldier or as a someone during the time of war. And this answers all my everything I need for that.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Am I correct in my assumptions?
Yeah, I think that the wartime traits, the wartime talents, the values that we've put in here are, because a lot of Star Trek, we kind of like shoot last, right? We want to use our words first, and we want to shoot last. And so our characters are designed for that type of game. Well, if you're designing a character to participate in a war story, those traits and values are going to be quite different, right? Your focuses as well. Like you might even want to use different focuses. So we provide guidance for all of those on how to write traits, and we give examples of traits that would be applicable during wartime. As far as the talents go, we get more minutia into like combat. We also add a lot more options for like people that like diplomats that are talking during wartime, right? Because war isn't just about pew pew pew. There's a lot of that. It's probably primarily that, but there's also a significant part of it that is diplomacy and trying to convince people to come to your side and things like that. So we even tried to include a lot of traits and values and talents in there that support that mode of play as well.
As well as roles. You have the Admiral, Ambassador, Field Medic, Combat Engineer, Army Officer. That's a bunch more. That's really awesome. And again, these are all from, would you say these mostly from most eras from Star Trek?
Yeah, and in fact, all these roles have existed in other books in the line. This is the first time they've been brought together, and I think we spent a little extra time drilling down into what each of them are. So we have a lot of the civilian roles from the player guide. We have a few of the admiral roles from the command source book. We have all of the combat squads from the operations division book, and I think there's even like one or two in here that were in the rules digest as well. So we really wanted to give these roles a treatment, sort of like we did in the player guide, as far as roles go, to tell players who are they, why are they cool, what are their abilities like, and like here's a quick thing to, like, if you want to make one of these up quite real quick, here are some focuses and values you can consider when you're doing it.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you took the concept from the player's guide with the quick build sidebar and dropped that in here as well for each of them, because I think that just helps players who may not be as familiar with the subject matter, right? That just helps them a little faster get into what's intended for that role. So I think that was a great addition to the chapter.
And on top of that, we take the roles that were covered in the player guide and we talk about how are they different during wartime. Because the expectations out of a science officer are completely different when you're at war than when you are conducting experiments, right? You're going to be using your sensors for vastly different things, more likely than not. So there's a whole section on that as well.
Is there anything new in the weapons and gear section in the character options?
So no real specific weapons or gear, but ways to use weapons and gear. Aaron Pollier went in and talked about like hot loading torpedoes and possibly having them be more destructive to either the enemy or to you. We put in there how can you use phasers to stun a planet or a ship, like the ship's phasers, like we saw in TOS a couple of times. So lots of really cool alternative uses for the weapons on your ship in that section.
And I see that there's also some, I don't know if you call them new rules, but there's like some discussion about trauma and scars. Could we talk about that and how it's implemented into the rules per se?
So the trauma of war section is really about how does war impact an individual, and in many cases it can leave them scarred in not just physically but also mentally, and that's what this is really about. It shows how war has an impact on a character, and so if you use this system, you can take a scar, which is basically a trait that acts as a complication that you permanently have. It doesn't necessarily need to be a missing limb, but it could be like, something that's going on in your mind. You can't stop thinking about it, things like that. And essentially you can use these traits to suppress your values and do other things while you're in wartime. And yeah, just really cool character telling implements that I'm excited to try at some point here.
Yeah, I mean, they may not be for every player group. I think you'd want to have a conversation with your players. If you're thinking, if you're a game master or a player and you see this and you're like, oh, this is some really interesting, mechanics that we can add to our characters and really even further deepen the role play or, add more layers to your characters. But it may not be for everybody. Not everybody necessarily wants to add more trauma to their characters, and that's totally fine. So, talk to your group, find out what everyone's tolerance level is for it, and then try it out. I think me personally, as a writer and as a game master, like I love piling on to my characters, like my own characters, but also I like to challenge my player characters, right, that are in my group, um, with the caveat, right, that I'm doing it safely, right? I'm not trying to hurt somebody, or I'm not trying to, you know, I'm not trying to trigger one of my players to, because that's not what I want. I mean, obviously, it's still a game. We're here to have fun, get together, have a good time, tell great stories together. But I think this is just another layer of options, really focused on like wartime. But it also doesn't necessarily have to be wartime specifically. I think you could use the scars system for like just any kind of trauma, right? And like you think watch any Star Trek, these characters are facing horrific events on the regular out there in the middle of nowheresville space, right? There's all kinds of trauma happening. And like, how many episodes do we watch where somebody gets blasted out of an airlock, or blown out of a, or sucked out into space from a hull breach or something, right? I mean, even that little thing, it's eye candy on the screen for 2 seconds, but like if you extrapolate that and go, oh, wait a minute, my bunkmate just got sucked out into space and is now dead, right? I mean, the show may pass that off because they don't have the time to focus on everything, but that's a traumatic event that it may not have anything to do with war, but it might have everything to do with how that impacts your character, and you could have whole sessions built around processing that, and then seeing how that impacts your character, and their values.
Mm. And I really enjoyed that section because I remember some of my favorite episodes of Star Trek Next Generation, for example, isn't just like the main plot, but usually like the first 5 minutes has these like almost like random events sometimes,
Hmm.
and some of them are more serious than others, and some of them are are dealing with certain things. I know for myself, if I saw Q and go through even one of the adventures that they went through, I would go back to Earth and probably take 30 years of therapy just to deal with what I just witnessed.
Hmm.
So I'm really glad that there's rules for that, and so viewers, I just want you to know this is only chapter one we're talking about, and we're about maybe 20 minutes in.
Uh-huh.
This book is about a little bit over 220 pages, and it's full of really, really great options. I know we're just about to enter the game mastering and campaign section. So I guess let me start with what can you tell us about this section?
Well, I think that the game mastering. So there were two things we wanted to do here. We wanted to talk about how does the tactical campaign overlay work, and how can you use it to tell stories. And then the second part was to provide optional rules for play, to make things feel more tactical and more warlike at your table. So those were the two goals of this chapter.
Yeah, and I think there's some great stuff kind of hidden in here. I think if you dig into the chapter a little bit, you'll see a whole section that Aaron Pollier wrote about notable star systems, just like really interesting places that are out there in the franchise, or within the setting, that you can just drop right in and use it as a set piece for some adventures, or just as a component of the tactical campaign. And that's something we haven't really done in our books before, is to just like provide different worlds with a lot of detail. So I think check that out, certainly. And then the optional rules, you we talk about ways to adapt the campaign to the Klingon perspective, or how to fold in the independent perspective. I think the Discovery Campaign Guide, we really tried to make an effort to say, you don't have to play Starfleet, you don't have to play Klingon, you can play an independent character, especially with using the tools that are in the player's guide, right? That really expanded the possibilities to where you don't have to play a Starfleet game. You don't have to play a Klingon game. You could play, you know, Ferengis doing stuff, or Orion traders, or pirates, or mercenaries, or Nausicaans. Like, I mean, there's as many possibilities as there are stars in the sky, right? I mean, you can do anything with it now. And so we tried to give a little bit of information about a Klingon game, or an independent game, or a Federation game, just to add more insights and possibilities to your game.
Mm. I know I like the sections where you talk about the different types of campaigns you could have. You mentioned this before, Al, about like you could have like stealth missions. What's exploration like in the time of war? Which I think that's a really cool thing that you touched on. But optional rules that really caught my attention. There's things in here that I've seen and I thought about, especially when you're playing in the moment and think about maybe I may have to homebrew stuff at the last second, because sometimes there'll be an instance like, okay, how do I solve this? And it looks like even there's some things in here like how about initiative? That you change that a little bit when it comes to like um, uh, during the times of war, during combat. Is there anything of these optional rules that you like the best?
I mean, I think that they could all be fun to try. I know that there's been lots of people looking for a mechanic for chases and pursuits. So we pulled that out of the SRD, the system reference document that Nathan put together, and we adapted it to Star Trek, which it's like a special type of extended task. Really, really cool and flavorful. And we talk about how does stealth work. Yeah, lots of really fun stuff in there that you can use or you don't have to use. It's completely up to you, you know. Again, it's something that you'll discuss at a session 0 with your players.
So let's go talk about campaign rules, chapter 3. What can you tell us about that?
So the campaign rules really refers to the tactical overlay and how it interacts with our stories. And this was a system that was basically given to us by Ivan Sorensen, who wrote 5 Parsecs from Home and 5 Leagues from the Borderlands. And basically, he gave it to us, and we tweaked it and made it Star Trekky, and said, "All right, how does this enhance a story?" And that was kind of the direction we went.
So I think this whole chapter is all about that tactical campaign, and it breaks it down to explain like how to just play through it. Like I mean, for the purposes of the Klingon Federation-Klingon War, we broke it down into 3 phases, right? So you got the early war, mid-war, late war, broadly speaking, based on what we know of the war from the show, and then each phase has 3 turns, and then you just work through those different phases and turns. And I think the great thing about the tactical campaign that Al and the team put together is its flexibility, right? So if you want like literally the entire tactical campaign component is not tied to discovery, right? It is a tactical campaign overlay that you can put into any era of Star Trek, as you see fit. And if you want to do like a really big, long involved war, like the Dominion War, that was like multiple years, add more phases, add more turns, right? Or maybe you want to do like a smaller border conflict, maybe do 1 phase with 2 turns, right? Make it a smaller engagement as opposed to a huge, gigantic engagement. And I think once people get their hands on this and really start kind of like poking at it and playing with it, and I think we're going to see some really cool expansions of it, from the player base. And I can't just wait to see what they do with the framework that we've set up for them, especially because I think this entire chapter can be lifted whole cloth, and again, dropped into any era of play. And the only thing you really need to change to make it unique to a different era would be 2 of the random tables. There's a D20 table in here for ship assets, character assets, and resources. Now the resources, if I remember, Al, are pretty I don't want to say generic, pretty ubiquitous
Yes.
across the franchise. So you probably won't need to tweak that one that much. But the ship assets and the character assets, we tried to make them specific to Discovery, Strange New Worlds, original series era, folding in that 60, 70-year period of time where we thought we could tie characters in and kind of and surprise readers. But if you wanted to do this for like the Cardassian War or the Cardassian Border Wars, just change those ship names or adjust the stats, and then change the character assets and change the stats. We do provide some guidance in here. And Al, you can talk to this a little bit more, but each asset in the table has particular power levels for certain categories, and those categories are derived scores from STA scores, right? So, like for instance, a ship asset might have a medical score, right? And that medical score is based on their computers plus medicine, right? So it's pretty easy to build this table for other eras just by putting the names and stuff in, and then going from there. Al, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you You got it pretty good there. Yeah, so like if you pull out any book from Star Trek Adventures and look at a stat block for a ship or a character or an adversary, and you do the combination here that we've provided for you, you can build it into an asset for that campaign overlay, which is super super helpful. And the five powers are medical, military, personal, science, and social. And those are all derived from different stats, which is cool as well.
And like Al said, like literally any STA product, you can pull those stat blocks and grab those derived assets and or derived scores, right? And immediately you've got a new asset to drop into a table. And I mean, after 7 years, we've got hundreds of stat blocks out
Yeah.
there, right? I mean, I can't even imagine how many there are out there. I'm sure someone's kept track of it, and kudos to you for doing that. Please tell me because I'd love to know what the number is.
So, chapter 4, 5, and 6, early war, mid war, and late war. So, how did you all construct uh, these three chapters? Like, how did you put the adventures together?
Mhm.
Well, the basic outline of the chapters is we have a mission that bookends the beginning and the end of each stage of the campaign, and those missions come from one or two lines from certain episodes in Discovery Season 1. There are events that like they mention happen. You might get to see a clip of it happening. But for the most part, all of the stuff that we cover in our missions is stuff that was not covered at all on Discovery. It maybe just dropped in a line or two here or there. And the goal of that was so that you can tell your own story, right? We don't want Discovery to be the hero ship. We want your ship to be the hero ship. So we kind of laid it out like that um, through all three stages.
Yeah, the I mean, if you watch Discovery and really look at what they're doing, like they've got a lot of stuff going on in the background that their story is overlaid on top of it, right? You got all their characters and all their story arcs and all the challenges that are happening, and then you've got things that are happening that are unique to Discovery by virtue of the fact that it's the only ship that has a spore drive and it can do things that no other ship can do. Fine, great, but in the meantime, there's the whole rest of Starfleet doing their thing, and so on one level you got the Discovery doing their story, but they reference a ton of stuff that's happening in the universe at that time, especially once the war kicks off, because like there are months like from one episode to the next episode they cover they skip a month or a month and a half, right? And they maybe briefly reference kind of what's happening in the war, but from a role-playing game perspective, like 6 months in a role-playing game, that could be like 20 sessions, right? I mean, you could spend a long time covering 6 months or 6 weeks in an RPG session, and that's just right material for a game master and a player to dig into. So I think sure, I understand some of the criticism about Discovery, but at the same time, I don't get it. Like, because like if you really watch it, um, they go places that a lot of Star Trek series haven't gone before, especially with characters. And I think the characters on Discovery are some of the most honest and direct characters I've ever seen especially a Star Trek show, in terms of like some of the really hard conversations that they have with each other and the super super complex character interactions that they have with each other, and other people as like the whole thing comes together, right? And that expands into season two, but we won't even get into season two. But it's all that foundation's right here in season one. But as a game master and a player, right? If you look just if you take the discovery portion of the story out of it and plug in your ship, then you're off and running, because like there is so much to do in this time period that has nothing to do with Discovery. But conveniently they're gone for 6 months, right? Once they go to the Terran universe, Starfleet's left on their own, and then those are some great stories right there, right? So you really got to kind of look beyond the surface of the book and beyond the surface of the series and dig down and find out all that great Star Trek goodness that's in there.
Yeah.
And as you're playing through the story, you want to keep track of what you're doing and be the hero, because once you get to that final episode, characters start recurring,
Oh,
ships start recurring, You know, and without being too spoilery, it's a really cool couple of moments when that happens in the final episode of the campaign.
Yeah, and we were talking about this earlier, or on a different chat. Um, the six big missions in the book are pretty much self-contained, right? They don't have to be serialized. They can be, episodic, and drop them into your campaign as you see fit, and then fold in the mission briefs, etc. But there is enough meat that the team put into here where if you wanted to serialize this story, you could, and then pull on the threads from 1 to 2 to 6 and everything. And Michael Duxbury, he's one of the writers. He wrote the finale, the notional finale of the campaign, and he intentionally, pulled in threads from some of the other missions and from some of the mission briefs to, but not in a prescriptive way, right? But to say, hey, if you are playing this as kind of a linked campaign, here's how all those little plots and all those little threads can kind of all come together, without getting any spoilers. So, but we wanted to be really intentional about making the story flexible and make it just this big honking tool set that you can use as much or as little as you want. But I think I'd really be like, I want to run this, or I want to, I want to run it, but B, I want to be in it. And I know it's hard because like I know everything, but there's still enough room in here to be surprised, I think, even if you've been working on it for 2 years. I don't know how you feel, Al.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I think that there would still be stuff that pops up that would be surprising to me, and I was the lead writer.
Yeah.
Chapter 7, Starships. So what's in here exactly? Is there anything new? Is everything now more kind of like similar to the other chapters where everything's more compiled together from other source books, dealing specifically of dealing with like during times of war?
Yeah. So as we did in Utopia Planitia, right? We gave a starship frame, and then we gave a named ship. So because the Discovery campaign guide gave frames but not named ships, Aaron took those frames and created named ships of them, versions of them for the campaign. So those actually are the assets that you use in the campaign overlay. These ships show up in some of the stories and missions that you play, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of what we were going for in both the ship section and in the adversary section.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. You can look at the Discovery campaign guide and kind of see what we were starting to go for, where we presented a bunch of new space frames, one page per space frame. And then as we were finalizing that book, we were working on Utopia Planitia, and I think Aaron and I don't remember who all was involved in the conversation. We're thinking, we should really kind of expand on that and present the space frame, but also offer a sidebar with a representative ship, all statted up that they can drop into their campaign as needed, and do a 2-page spread instead of a single-page spread for each ship. And I was like, yeah, let's do that. And we got the page count. Sure, let's do it. But then we got to this book, and it was like, well, wait a minute. We've already introduced all the space frames. We don't want to repeat that content. But then we looked at Utopia Planitia, and then we looked at the Discovery Campaign Guide, and we realized, oh, wait a minute, we didn't really have an opportunity to present, representative ships. So Al and Aaron, they cranked it out, and actually I think this chapter was mostly Aaron. I think he's the starship guru, and so we did a representative. So if you got the Discovery Campaign Guide, you got the space frames in there to use for your own ships, but now you got representatives for each new class that we presented. So it kind of brings it all together, but in 2 books instead of one big book.
Yeah, the only part that I wrote in this was the swarms of ships rules. Aaron did everything else.
That's such a cool rule, though. I mean, we should mention that briefly. I think weirdly, out of this 232-page book, I think that's one of my favorite little sidebars is the swarm of ships option, where because I love I don't know why it impacted me so much, but in season 2 of Discovery, in the finale, when the Enterprise and the Discovery are facing off against the control ships, right? And at one point, just like thousands of these little drone fighters come off the Section 31 ships and come at the Enterprise and Discovery, and it's just this swarm after swarm of little fighters. And I was like, that is so cool. How can I make that happen in a game? Mechanically, I mean, I sure I could do it narratively, but like, give me a little bit of mechanics to do something with, and we hadn't had that before. And then Al came up with this awesome rule for swarms of ships, and I was like, "Yep, that's what I need."
Before we talk about the last chapter, allies and adversaries,
Hmm.
I have to say again, the layout and the artwork is superb. I really love the design of these Star Trek books.
Yeah, thank you.
Um, so Al, being that you were the lead writer for this, did how did how closely did you work with the art team when it came to conceptualizing this book?
So everybody that wrote a mission got, I believe, got a chance to write an art brief. We allowed them to each do that for the first time, and I think we got new art in just about all of those missions.
Hmm.
And then I went through and did a bunch of art briefs as well that I sent off to Jim, and he got off to. Do you send those to Ariel, Jim?
Yeah, so once I get them from you guys, I tweak them a little bit. I went back and forth with you folks a couple of times, especially in terms of one of the most challenging parts is write the description of what you want, but then also come up with references, right? Like scour the internet, go to Google, go to whatever, try to find images that kind of roughly sort of match what you're trying to write, so that we can give the artists something to go off of, right? So once you and me and the other writers kind of banged those initial art briefs together, I sent all those over to Ariel. He and I did some iterations where he had some questions. I bring in the Star Trek lore knowledge that I have, and then he would send those off to the artist, and then they go do their amazing thing. So it's a very collaborative process, working with going from writer to writer to me, and then me and Ariel banging it out because Ariel's our AD, art director, and then he goes off and makes amazing art with his team of artists, right? So it all comes together, and then of course it goes to the licensor because we want to make sure that we're accurately representing the brand in all of its many facets, and that we're getting the ships right, and that the Klingon ships look like Klingon ships, and the Federation ships look like Federation ships, and all the uniforms and stuff are in the right places and all that stuff. So it's a very, very collaborative process. But I think this might have been one of the first books where I was really intentional about giving the writers an opportunity to write an art brief. I think I got the first chance to write an art brief way back on the command book when Sam made me the lead writer on the command source book, and I knew that the command source book was going to be the template for the operations book and the science book too, right? So it was not just being lead writer on that book. It was also like, oh, I've got to figure out what does this entire little trilogy of books look like from a conceptual outline kind of standpoint. And he gave me the opportunity to write some art briefs for the command source book, and I was like, "Ooh, this is a whole different world that I've never gotten involved with." I mean, I learned all kinds of stuff because like I had big stupid ideas of like all kinds of things happening, and the artist, the AD at the time was like, "No, you gotta scale that down to half a page. You can't have a million people in the background. You can't have millions of ships in the background. Except in certain cases." And I was like, "Oh yeah, you gotta like focus on. It's like a comic panel almost. You got to focus on one specific instance or one specific event or one thing." Um, and so, it's a learning process, but yes, but I remember having such a great experience writing those art briefs and then working with the artists that I wanted to give the writers an opportunity to at least write the art brief, to say, you have a vision, like you wrote this adventure, you clearly have a vision in your head of what these alien species look like, or what this planet looks like, or this environment that you've created for the player characters to go through. Write it down. Let's figure out a way to commission that artwork and get it in here so that we can include it in your adventure. And I think most of the adventures had one piece. I don't remember though. I'd have to go back and look at the briefs, but I think everybody had a chance to do one. I'm not sure we actually had the time to do one for everybody, but I think we got close. So anyway, that was just that was me as a program manager trying to give the writers more opportunities to do something different. And in Al's case, like because Al, I know you are you are publishing your own stuff too, right? You've moved on to publish Sentience, and you got another one in the works, and this is all useful skills that you are going to be able to transfer to your own stuff. And I want to give everybody an opportunity to do something like that because, like, I was given that opportunity and I learned, and now I have the position and the opportunity to pass that on, right? And I think it's just going to elevate the whole team and give them opportunities to go do cool stuff with whatever they've got next on their plate, right? So I'll stop there. I'm kind of rambling, but that was the philosophy and the idea behind getting the writers to do more of this stuff.
Uh, Again, before we head to the talk about the last chapter a bit, if you had to pick one of these ships, which ship would you pick?
Oh man,
Oh
that's a tough
wow,
question.
gosh.
Let me pull them up real quick because there are. So we talked about how ships have primary uses and primary powers, and not all of them are really, really good at combat. Some of them are good at science, some of them are good, and I think that's kind of the fascinating part of the story, right? Discovery was a scientific vessel that
Hmm.
all of a sudden is on the front lines of a war because it has a tool that nobody else has. Um, I really like the Walker class. I think that's a really cool, like the Shenzhou. The one that we have in here is called the USS Thunderbird. I think that'd be a fascinating ship to be on at some point. Um, yeah, there's just so many options. Like it all depends on what your crew wants to do. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I mean, I am not as big of a Starship nerd as Aaron is, right? By any stretch of the imagination. But like, like him, I grew up on the Franz Joseph technical manuals. I grew up on the FASA, next generation officer's manual that had all those weird Starship classes in it with the nacelles in weird places and the necks like three extra layers long or whatever. And I was like, okay, these are cool and different. And certainly in some of my old Star Trek campaigns, we would use some of those unusual ships. I think my copy of the I don't know where it is. My copy of the TNG officer's manual, right, the purple cover. Like we marked ours up in pencil saying, yeah, we used this ship. This ship made an appearance. This ship made an appearance. We were on this ship for a while, because the classes were cool and everything else. But I think one of the things I really appreciated about Discovery, I think season one, because season two didn't really focus on it, but season one really showed us a whole bunch of new ship classes in this time period, right? And then what Aaron, because he's so fantastic at this, Aaron extrapolated that to say, look, these ships, like Starfleet ships, last for decades, right? Like Starfleet builds their ships to last and to be refit and to be repurposed and to continue on in service. And so, some of these ships could conceivably be around while in Kirk's era, like just off screen, right? When the Constitution's doing their thing, you got the Nimitz class and the Cardenas class and the Walker class and the Shenzhou and whatnot, and it's like, yeah, cool, because this is something that we didn't have for a long time in the franchise, was like more ships for the original series, right? We had the Constitution class, that was about it, right? And then some fans kind of extrapolated what did the Reliant look like before it got refit, like the Constitution class, right? So you kind of play with it a little bit, but now we got so many more options. And to be honest, like if I had to pick one of these ships, I've really grown to like the ship designs that have four nacelles instead of the traditional two. I think they just look different and interesting. So I think like either the Nimitz class or the especially the Cardenas class. I think it just looks cool, right? And it's Star Trek, and like if I'm playing a game with my group, like I know at one point Eagle Moss made models for most of these, and I think most of these ships are in STO now, right? And I don't know if STO still has that program where you can buy a custom miniature for the ship that you make in the game. But I mean, even if not, I could probably find a way to to get a miniature. But it's just a cool looking ship to put on the table. And what's neat about them, and I promise I'll stop because I know I'm rambling, um, is that it's kind of unique because like no Star Trek series is focused on a Cardenas class, right? And there's enough resources out there from fandom that you could do it. I'm sure somewhere out there someone's made a Master Systems display for a Cardenas class, right? I'm sure I would just go hit some of the usual Starship websites that are out there with artwork and information. And then that helps the players and the game master, like, this is our own corner of the Star Trek universe, right? We are on this unique ship, this unique class that none of the other series have really touched on, and now we get to go do cool things. So that's what I would do. I would pick one of these really cool, different not species, ship classes that we just don't see on screen that much, and just tell amazing stories with it.
Chapter 8, Allies and Adversaries. It seems self-explanatory, but what can you tell us about this section?
Well, again, we this is where you get to see a lot of these characters that you know from Star Trek canon, like especially from the movie era, and from a bit of the original series as well. And we kind of we imagined them younger in their careers,
Mhm.
and you know what they might have been doing. So some really cool characters like Matt Decker and consuls John St. Talbot, like just lots of really neat, deeper cuts of
Mhm.
characters who also are your assets in the campaign overlay.
Yeah, I mean, I love doing that. I love the deep cuts. I mean, like we said at the top of the show, 5 of the 6 species, new playable species, are deep cuts right out of the movies, right? And we brought in some movie characters and just de-aged them basically, like Disney, like the CGI software. And I tell you, I am threatening. I've joked about this before, but somehow, some way, someday, in some book, I'm gonna find a way to do an art brief that like takes the original series characters and puts them in like Strange New Worlds era uniforms or Discovery era uniforms or something just different, so that people will be like, wait a minute, that's Chekhov, but he's in the wrong uniform. Why is that? And it's like, well, if you look at the timeline, he might have been in that uniform at the very as a cadet, right? So I want to, not that I want to tweak fandom, right? But I want to really hit the nail on the head that this franchise is a continuum, and it's pretty consistent, right? From era to era, and I just think it would be fun, right, to see that. But that's the power of an RPG, by the way, is that you can imagine anything, and for the purposes of a RPG book, right? I mean, we can do anything we want in the artwork as long as we can imagine it, and then as long as we have the budget for it, right? But for the RPG, at least, once you get it to your game table, you have no budget. I mean, you have an unlimited budget for makeup and actors and everything else, and you can do whatever you want. So, you know
Hmm.
have fun.
And then the book ends with some Game Master campaign tracker, a player campaign tracker, which is great, especially if you're doing a lot of time travel episodes, which I tend to get somehow stuck in when I play Star Trek.
Hmm.
And there was and the safety checklist, what I thought was awesome.
Hmm.
That way, if anyone's an issue, I think sometimes the hardest thing about session zero stuff is not um, is trying to let someone know you have a problem with something without having them feel like having the conversation get awkward, or they're having them
Hmm.
feel offended even though you feel bothered by something. It's that weird communication thing. And I
Yeah.
think this, I was looking at this carefully, and it's awesome. I think it's a great way of kind of saying, hey, I just want to let you know this is what I may have trouble with, and then you could have that discussion.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah. And Al, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty confident that Allison Seib was the
Yep.
one who put the safety checklist together, right? So I want to give them the credit that's due, because there's a whole sub chapter in here about safety and consent, and this safety checklist ties right into that.
mm. Especially
So
when you get
thank you, Allison, for doing it. I think this is the first book where we really like we talked about it in the player's guide, but we really wanted to blow that out and emphasize it more, especially in this book, given all the trauma and potential for triggers in here. And in fact, I think somebody mentioned, Al, I don't remember who it was specifically, but this is like the first STA book that has a content warning within the introduction, just to say, look, this is some pretty heavy stuff. It may not be this is unusual for Star Trek Adventures, and please talk to your group. And like we made sure to emphasize that up front in the book to just not to scare people, obviously, but just to give you some forewarning.
yeah, I mean, as much as I may enjoy war scenes or things like that in different sci-fi role playing games, many
Mhm.
people may not be. I know some of my relatives don't. So I try to compensate and work with them so that we all can have a good time.
Mhm.
Um, but uh, but yes. So just to share my concluding thoughts, this book is awesome. I love the fact that I mentioned before. This feels like a almost like a rule book part two.
Yeah, I think that this is something that many players have been looking for. Like we always talk about story and how that drives the game and whatnot, but I know that there is a contingent of players since the FASA days that are super into the crunchiness. And I've been seeing lots of posts online of people from FASA that have taken interest, people that used to play Starfleet battles have taken interest and whatnot. And when I was putting this together, I was really thinking that this might appeal and bring those people into the game. So I'm excited to see that. I'm excited to see what people can put together with between this and Captain's Log as some type of mix. I'm really excited to see that as well. So the stories I'm sure that come out of this are going to be fantastic once people get a chance to delve into the system itself.
Yeah, yeah, and I really just hope that people check it out, because it's not just another discovery book, right? I mean, it is all about the war and the tactical campaign and story, right? It's like, I mean, there's two big, actually, I guess there's three big chunks to this book, right? It's the whole campaign that we provide, 6 full missions, tons of mission briefs. You can take that whole campaign and go wherever you want with it, almost like Shackleton expands to some extent. You could, lift it and put it into any era of play, and you've got a pre-packaged campaign ready to go. And I know that there are game masters out there who don't have the time to plan out their own campaigns, and they want something, largely pre-built for them that they can just use. Like, well, okay, well, here you go. Here's 200 pages worth of stuff that you can use. In addition to that, there is that whole chapter on player stuff. So you have more talents, more species, more stuff to enhance your games, whatever area you're playing. But then, especially this tactical campaign, you can use that for any era of play. And I know that we were talking on one of the episodes of Continuing Conversations. We only talked a little bit about it because we want to expand on it at some point. But the framework of the tactical campaign gives you the opportunity to scale up and down and bigger, to where, like right now, the way it's set up, you've got character assets and ship assets, but there's nothing stopping you from changing that into regiment assets and fleet assets, right? So instead of doing individual ships doing stuff or individual characters doing stuff, all of a sudden you got this wartime situation where you're sending off entire regiments to do things. I'm thinking of like the Civil War or the American Revolution or something. Like, instead of just like little groups, little individuals doing stuff, you're sending whole components of armies. And then same thing with the fleet battles, right? So for the Dominion War especially, you could say, okay, because they talk about all kinds of different fleets and wings and stuff in the Dominion War, right? So you could create a fleet asset sheet and say, okay, I've got a wing of Galaxy class ships, I've got a wing of Defiant class ships, and then that wing is going to be your asset to go off and do stuff. So you can really play with the scale of this, from a very, very small intimate battle to like a galaxy spanning war. And again, I just can't wait to see what players do with this once they get their hands on it and they're like, oh, there's some possibilities here, and they really see what the tool set is here to do. And gosh, Al, we feel like this after every book we release, because like, okay, here's a whole bunch of tools. It's like we're at Home Depot and we're just dumping the big toolbox on top of people's heads and saying, okay, make something cool, and then share it with us so we can see it and enjoy it. So I hope people try it out, and I hope people dig it. I'm really excited for this book, and I just can't wait to see what happens with it.
So viewers, hope you give this book a chance. There are so many great player options and game master options that it will enhance any era of Star Trek that you're a fan of. Any last words before we wrap up?
No, just what? Thank you, Manny, for all that you do for the industry, and also for Star Trek Adventures. Thanks so much for inviting us back. Really appreciate you, and Matt, as always. And then also thank you to the fans, like your fans, our fans, all the fans out there, for supporting the game, supporting the hobby, getting other gamers involved. Just really appreciate all that you're doing. Al, what's your closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just thanks for having us on, giving us the chance to chat, and
Yeah.
thanks to Jim for giving me the opportunity to be the lead writer and for giving me peeks behind the scenes and how things work. And I swear every week still I send him some annoying question about the industry that I'm sure he's like, but he's right there answering it for me. And like, so yeah, I appreciate you, Jim, and I appreciate you, Manny, for having us on.
Yeah, you bet.
So I will leave a link in the description below for anyone that wants to check out this book, so that you can find and get yourself a copy. And yes, live long, prosper, everyone. Take care.
Yep. Be safe, be well, everybody. Cheers.